Elara's fingers, gnarled and scarred from decades of needlework, traced the almost invisible tear along the shoulder seam of the tailored Italian suit. The fabric, a deep, obsidian worsted wool, felt impossibly fine under her touch, a luxurious texture that screamed expensive, dangerous, and utterly out of place in the dusty, quiet confinement of her small tailoring shop. The air in the back room was thick with the scent of steam, linen, and the faint, unsettling aroma of rain-soaked leather that clung to the suit's owner. That man. Julian. The name itself felt like a heavy, polished stone in her mind. She was an elderly woman, a seamstress of 65 who had seen the rise and fall of neighborhood dynasties in this small corner of the city, yet nothing in her quiet life had prepared her for the raw, unsettling power of the man who now sat waiting in the front, a shadow against the dim light filtering through the window. She had learned long ago that the most dangerous men were the ones who moved the quietest, who commanded attention not through volume, but through sheer, unyielding presence. Julian was that kind of man. He was the city's unseen architecture of power, a man whose name was only whispered, always in fear or reverence, never in casual conversation. He was the Mafia boss. His suit, draped over the small antique dress form, was a map of controlled violence. The tear she was mending had not come from a snag on a door handle. It was a clean, precise slice, too deep for fabric alone. Beneath the lining, Elara's fingers had brushed against a hardened, dried residue. Not mud, not grease, but something metallic and dark. Blood. Her heart gave a slow, measured thump-thump against her ribs, a rhythm of dread she had become accustomed to since Julian first darkened her doorway a month ago. A massive, silent figure demanding quick, discreet service. The silence of the shop was always the loudest part of her day. It was the space where the fear of her own vulnerability nested. Elara lived for her granddaughter, Maya, a girl who had been her light, her sole reason for enduring the suffocating weight of her life after the unexpected death of her daughter years ago. 2 weeks ago, Maya had vanished. Gone, leaving nothing behind but a hastily scribbled note about a new opportunity and a phone that went straight to voicemail. The police had been useless, offering bureaucratic platitudes about young people needing space. But Elara knew her granddaughter. Maya was bright, ambitious, but fiercely loyal. She wouldn't have just left. Julian's sudden, persistent patronage of her shop, a tiny establishment he clearly should have bypassed for an atelier on the north side, felt like another tightening coil of dread. He brought his repairs late, always after sundown, his imposing frame escorted by 2 men whose eyes never left the street. He paid in crisp, sequential hundreds, and his requests were simple: perfection and silence. As she finished the final, almost invisible stitch on the exterior and turned her attention to the inner lining, her fingers instinctively slipped into the jacket's inner breast pocket to check for obstructions. That pocket was the suit's hidden sanctuary, the place for only the most private possessions. She felt the thin, familiar stiffness of cardstock. For a professional, checking pockets was routine, a necessary invasion before the final pressing. Her thumb and forefinger pinched the edge of the card, pulling it free. It was a photograph. Not a document, not money, not a hidden weapon, but a small, worn photograph, softened and creased at the edges from repeated handling. Elara's breath hitched, a small, painful gasp that felt loud enough to crack the quiet. The room, the suit, the tension, everything faded into a low hum. The photograph was of Maya. Not a recent picture, but one from 2 years ago, when Maya had turned 18. A bright, laughing girl with Elara's dark, soulful eyes, a scattering of freckles across her nose, and a careless braid falling over her shoulder. She was standing by the harbor, bathed in sunlight, vibrant and alive. The photo wasn't an official headshot. It was a snapshot of pure, unposed joy. It was one Elara kept tucked in her own prayer book. Her grip tightened on the delicate card, her hands beginning to tremble, not with fear, but with a sudden, devastating surge of adrenaline and shock. Maya. Her missing Maya. Why was her picture, a treasured private relic, tucked into the inner sanctuary of a man like Julian, a man she barely knew, but whose very existence was a shadow over the city? Elara moved as if through water, her legs stiff. She knew the golden rule. Do not cross the line. Do the work, take the money, and be invisible. But the photograph was a seismic shift, an unbearable weight of information that could not be ignored. It was a lifeline and a hangman's knot all at once. She walked slowly to the front of the shop. Julian was seated in her old, worn armchair, a stark contrast to his perfect suit. He wasn't reading, nor was he on his phone. He was simply waiting, a sculpture of controlled impatience, his face turned toward the rain-streaked window. The two guards were by the door, impassive and massive. The air shifted as she approached. He sensed her presence, her disturbance, before she was within 3 feet of him. His head turned slowly, those dark, intelligent eyes lifting to meet hers. They held no warmth, no malice, just an unnerving, complete evaluation. "The suit is ready, Mr. Romano," she said, her voice a dry whisper that felt alien in her own throat. She held the photograph between her thumb and forefinger, making no attempt to conceal it, letting the sunlight catch the glossy surface. His gaze dropped to the photo, and for the first time, Elara saw a flicker of something she couldn't immediately categorize. Not fear, not anger, but perhaps a profound, inconvenient recognition. He didn't deny it. He didn't snatch it. He simply waited, his powerful hands resting lightly on the arms of the chair. "Is there an issue, Elara?" Julian's voice was a low, resonant rumble, the kind of sound that traveled through the floorboards and settled in her bones. He used her first name, a familiarity she had neither granted nor wanted, yet it sounded entirely natural on his tongue. She took a deep breath, the accumulated sense of the shop and the man filling her lungs. Her fingers were clammy against the small, precious image. She felt the weight of 65 years, of motherhood and loss, of being invisible, and suddenly, terrifyingly, seen. "This is my granddaughter," she said, holding the photograph higher. Her voice, though still weak, held a steady, uncompromising edge of demand. "Maya, she is missing. She has been gone for 2 weeks. Why, Mr. Romano, is her photograph in the pocket of your suit?" The two guards by the door shifted almost imperceptibly, a soundless realignment of danger. The simple question had ripped open the thin veneer of normalcy, exposing the raw, lethal truth that lay beneath. Julian studied the photograph one moment longer, then lifted his eyes back to hers. The stillness around him tightened, absorbing the light and the air. His expression was unreadable, the mask of a man who had mastered the art of concealing empires of emotion. He spoke, his voice dropping to a near confidential tone that somehow felt more dangerous than a shout. "Because, Elara," he began, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that held her suspended. "I took it from her. And the reason I took it, the reason I carry it, is the reason she is no longer here with you. She's not missing. She is in an apartment 5 blocks from here, and she is under my protection." The statement, delivered with the quiet authority of a king signing a decree, struck her with the physical force of a blow. It wasn't a question of if he could do this. The reality was that he had. Protection. From what? "Protection?" Elara echoed, the single word ringing hollowly. "You, the man who brings blood-soaked suits to my shop, claim you are protecting my grandchild?" He rose slowly from the chair, a massive presence unfolding to its full, commanding height. He did not move threateningly, but simply was. And that was threat enough. He walked toward her, and the 2 bodyguards remained utterly still, watching the street. "I don't expect you to believe me, Elara," he said, stopping close enough that the scent of expensive cologne and damp wool filled her senses. He didn't try to take the photo. Maya made a very dangerous choice, an ex-boyfriend, an aspiring little thug named Vincente. thought he could use her access to her college records to run a discreet laundering operation. When she refused, he did what small, weak men do. He threatened her. Not just her. You. He inclined his head slightly toward the photograph in her hand. He was going to target the thing she loved the most to get what he wanted. I had been watching him for entirely different, more pertinent business reasons. I saw the escalating threat. I got to him first, and I got to Maya just as quickly. The suit. He glanced down at the nearly mended shoulder, a fleeting, almost bored expression on his face. The suit is irrelevant. It was a complication. Maya is not. He paused, letting the silence of the confession settle between them. Elara could feel the heat radiating off his body, the latent, contained energy of a storm. She is safe, Elara, completely safe. She thinks she has gone into hiding on her own, a brilliant, foolish child. But she is in my custody, in a place Vincente would never dream of looking. She is working on her schoolwork. She is eating. She is sleeping. I visit her for an hour every day. She doesn't know who I am to the world, only that I am the man who got her out. She only knows me as Jay. He looked at the picture one last time, his gaze lingering on the innocent joy of her granddaughter's face. I carry the photograph because it is a constant reminder of the collateral damage of my world and what I must protect from it. You think I am a monster, Elara, and perhaps I am. But I am her monster now. She will not be harmed while I draw breath. Elara's mind raced, struggling to process the monumental shift in her reality. The fear hadn't vanished. It had transformed from the generalized anxiety of a missing person case to the acute, focused terror of realizing her granddaughter was a pawn in a game played by titans. But mixed with the fear, a strange, electric sense of relief began to bloom, an insidious comfort in the presence of this formidable, dangerous man. He didn't lie. She had learned to read people's truth in the stillness of their eyes, and Julian Romano was telling a cold, hard, self-evident truth. Maya was under his roof. She finally lowered the photograph, her knuckles white. You have kept my granddaughter from me. I have saved her life, and yours, by creating distance, Julian corrected, his tone still measured, utterly devoid of apology. If you had known where she was, Vincente could have squeezed the information out of you. Now, you genuinely don't know. You are the grieving grandmother. It makes you a perfect witness for the police and a perfect distraction for her enemies. He reached out slowly, deliberately, and with the utmost care, lifted her hand, the one holding the photograph. His touch was firm, calloused, but astonishingly gentle, like a sculptor handling a delicate clay model. He took the photograph from her and slipped it back into the inner pocket of his coat, the repaired seam now facing the world, an invisible wound healed. I will arrange for you to see her, he promised, the intensity in his eyes deepening. Tonight, discreetly, you will be searched, you will be silent about the details of her location, and you will stay for an hour. Then you will come back here and continue to grieve your missing granddaughter until Vincente, and the problem he represents, is eliminated. Can you do that, Elara? Can you trust a monster to protect your light? The question wasn't rhetorical. It was a contract written in the tense space between them. Elara looked at the man who carried the world's darkness, but had somehow intercepted her light, holding it safe in his grasp. She looked at his eyes and saw not a promise of love, but a vow of lethal commitment. For Maya, the choice was simple. I will do whatever is required, Elara whispered, the resolve hardening the fear in her chest. But if you ever cause her a moment of fear, or if she comes to harm, then you will come for me, Julian finished for her, a dark, dangerous smile finally cracking the mask of his face, a genuine expression of understanding. I would expect nothing less, but you won't need to, I promise you that. Tonight, Elara, be ready. He turned and strode toward the door, his men immediately falling into step with him. He didn't look back. As the heavy door shut, sealing the quiet back into the shop, Elara felt the tremor of his presence lingering. She hadn't only found her granddaughter's location, she had stepped onto a path that would intertwine her fate irrevocably with the heart of the city's darkness. The hours stretched, heavy and slow, until the moon hung high and round, a perfect pale disk illuminating the quiet street. Elara waited in the back room, the same space where she had mended the suit, the scent of expensive wool and blood still ghosting the air. She hadn't been able to sew. She hadn't been able to eat. The thought of seeing Maya was a frantic, fluttering thing in her chest, a bird beating against a cage. A soft, almost silent knock came at the back door, the one that led to the alley. Elara moved instantly, her 65-year-old body galvanized by purpose. She opened it to find not Julian, but a younger man, dressed in a suit that was equally sharp, his face anonymous and professional. He gave a single curt nod. "Elara, follow me." She followed him out into the inky blackness of the alley, a hidden path she had only ever used for taking out the trash. The street was deserted. A sleek black sedan, unmarked, invisible, waited, its engine purring softly, a contained predator. She was ushered into the back seat, the door closing with a heavy, final thunk. The interior was immaculate, scentless, and isolating. The windows were tinted dark, cutting her off entirely from the passing world. The drive was short. Julian hadn't lied about the distance, but it felt endless. She was aware of the car's smooth acceleration, the confident, silent maneuvers of the driver. Every turn, every stoplight, was a confirmation that she was moving deeper into Julian's meticulously ordered world, a world where the laws of the street superseded those of the city. They stopped in front of a completely unremarkable brownstone, its windows dark and anonymous, blending into a row of similar buildings. It was a quiet, almost forgettable neighborhood, precisely the kind of place where a person would go to disappear. The anonymity was the armor. She was led through a side door and up a set of stairs, the heavy carpet muffling their steps. No one spoke. The silence was the real language of this place. At the third-floor landing, the younger man paused, nodded toward a door, and stepped back to guard the stairwell. Elara hesitated, her hand hovering over the cold brass knob. She was an intruder here, a brief, sanctioned lapse in a system designed for secrecy. She pushed the door open, the faint sound of a television and soft music, a welcome, mundane sound that banished the tension. The apartment was not opulent, but it was spacious, warm, and clearly temporary. A laptop sat open on a small dining table, surrounded by textbooks and notebooks. Maya's handwriting, unmistakable and comforting. And there, curled on a large, comfortable couch, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, was Maya. "Grandma?" Maya scrambled to her feet, the blanket falling away. She was thinner, perhaps, and her eyes held a trace of anxiety, but she was whole. She was alive. And she was here. The reunion was a rush of raw, uncontained emotion. Elara didn't rush, didn't talk. She simply wrapped her arms around her granddaughter, burying her face in the scent of her hair, shampoo and something sweet, familiar. For long minutes, there was only the sound of muffled sobs and the tight, desperate cling of two people who had feared they would never see each other again. "Oh, Maya, my darling," Elara finally managed, pulling back to cup her face in her hands. "I was so worried. Why didn't you call? The note was so vague. I called the police." Maya's eyes darted nervously toward a doorway leading to the kitchen. "I know, Grandma. I'm so sorry. I couldn't call. I didn't want him to trace it. The man who brought me here, Jay, he said it was too risky. He said I had to cut all communication. He said they would use you to find me." "Who, darling? Who would use me?" Maya's voice dropped to a terrified whisper. "Vincente. He was doing something shady with the college's registration codes. I saw him with the records, and I realized what he was doing. When I told him I wouldn't help him, he threatened to hurt us. He knew where you lived. Jay, he got me out just hours before Vincente's men came looking. He saved me, Grandma. A sound came from the doorway, the soft scrape of a leather shoe against the wooden floor. Julian. He stood leaning against the frame, a glass of amber liquor in his hand, watching the reunion with a cool, detached scrutiny. He hadn't changed clothes. His suit was still pristine, the freshly mended shoulder seam invisible. "Hello, Elara," he said, the words simple, but carrying the full weight of his presence. "See? I told you she was safe." A little dramatic, perhaps, but a necessary precaution. Maya turned, her demeanor shifting immediately from fear to a kind of nervous respect. "Jay, what are you doing here? I thought you weren't coming back until tomorrow." "A change of plans," he said, taking a slow sip of his drink. His eyes remained fixed on Elara, measuring her reaction to his presence, her emotional proximity to Maya. He was staking a claim, silently reasserting his control over the safety of the room. "Grandma, this is Jay," Maya said, taking Elara's hand and pulling her closer to the powerful man. He's amazing. He's taking care of everything. He's the reason I'm okay." "We've met, Maya," Elara managed, the formal, cool address of Mr. Romano, suddenly feeling too exposed, too dangerous. She settled for a simple acknowledgement. "Thank you. For this." She didn't mean just the meeting. She meant her granddaughter's life. Julian nodded, accepting her gratitude with the quiet acknowledgement of a man accustomed to profound, unspoken transactions. He set his glass down on a nearby side table. "You have 30 minutes, Elara," he said, his tone softening only slightly as he looked at Maya. 30 minutes to be the grandmother she needs. Then you will leave as quietly as you came, and you will wait for my instructions. Understood?" "Understood," Elara replied, her gaze meeting his, an unspoken truce passing between them. A shared purpose forged in the crucible of Maya's safety. The fear was still a dull ache, but the relief, the sheer intoxicating proximity of her granddaughter, was a narcotic. The next 30 minutes were a dizzying blur of whispered reassurances, quick, necessary lies for Maya's benefit about the police investigation, and the silent, heavy awareness of Julian's presence in the same room. He didn't interrupt them, but he didn't leave either, instead moving to the balcony doors, staring out at the cityscape, his profile stark and unyielding against the reflection in the glass. He was the watchman, the sentinel, the prison guard, and the rescuer, all in one unmoving frame. When the time was up, Elara knew it instinctively before the shadow of the young guard appeared at the door. Her time was over. Maya held her tightly, tears welling up again. "I'm scared, Grandma," Maya confessed, her voice thick. "But Jay keeps telling me I'm safe. He's the only one who doesn't look afraid." "Then you believe him, darling," Elara whispered into her hair, a sudden, fierce protectiveness rising for the strange, dangerous man. "You believe him, and you do exactly what he says. I will see you soon, I promise." Julian stepped away from the window, his movement drawing all the attention in the room. He didn't say goodbye to Elara. He simply put a heavy, reassuring hand on Maya's shoulder, a gesture of ownership and comfort that was both terrifying and utterly sincere. "Be a good girl, Maya," he commanded, his voice deep and warm. "Your grandmother needs to see that you are taking care of yourself. We have work to do." As Elara was escorted back out into the night, the image of Julian's hand on Maya's shoulder stayed with her. It was a clear, undeniable line in the sand. Maya was his responsibility now, and in Julian's world, responsibility was a form of absolute possession. The next few weeks fell into a surreal routine. Elara returned to the shop, reopening her business. The neighborhood, having heard the whispers about her missing granddaughter, offered condolences and questions she deflected with a stoic, convincing sadness. She became the perfect mask of grief and worry, her only real purpose to keep the secret Julian had entrusted her with. Julian, however, did not disappear. He started visiting her shop almost daily, not always for repairs. Sometimes, he would simply stand in the doorway, a monolith in his impeccable suit, watching her hands work. He would order a cup of the strong, bitter coffee she kept brewing in the back and sit in the sun-dappled front window, reading a newspaper, or, more often, just watching the street. His presence was a silent, gravitational force, drawing the eye, yet subtly warding off any unwelcome attention. She learned his habits. He never touched her tools. He always placed the empty cup exactly in the center of the small coaster. His eyes, when they occasionally met hers, were assessing, not judging. The silence between them was no longer the silence of dread, but a dense, complicated language of shared secrets and mutual responsibility. One afternoon, he came in late, the harsh glow of the street lamps filtering through the glass. He was alone, no guards. This was new. He walked straight to the back room, a move that felt incredibly intimate, a violation of the professional boundary they had established. He stood near the old Singer sewing machine, his gaze resting on a half-finished dress she was working on. "The police have stopped asking questions about Maya," he stated, his voice low, a confidential sound in the quiet space. "They think she's run away with a boy. Vincente is distracted. He's in trouble with his superiors. He's losing control of his territory. He's looking for the girl, but he's not looking hard enough." Elara stopped her work, the needle suspended above the fine silk. "And what does that mean for Maya?" Julian finally looked at her, and the intensity in his eyes was almost painful. "It means she is safer, but she is not yet free. Vincente must be dealt with permanently. He is desperate and predictable, and that is a fatal combination for me, and for her." He walked closer to her, and the closeness felt heavy, suffocating. The air itself seemed to crackle with the suppressed tension that had been building between them over weeks. "I have something to tell you, Elara, something she doesn't know. The morning I took her, she was going to her friend's apartment to meet Vincente and try to pay him off. She took everything she had saved. She had also taken a box of documents from her university that Vincente wanted." Elara frowned. "Documents? What kind?" Julian sighed, a sound of heavy resignation. "She was trying to buy her safety, but Vincente didn't want the documents. He wanted the records. And the money wasn't hers. It was from you, wasn't it? Your savings. The money you kept hidden for her education." Elara felt a sudden cold panic. "How do you—" "I know everything, Elara," he interrupted, his voice laced with authority. "I know that money was your daughter's life insurance payout, the money she was saving for Maya's final year. And I know that Vincente didn't take it that morning because I'd intercepted him. He escaped. But the money, I have it. It's in my safe. And I have the box of documents. They belong to you." He reached inside his immaculate jacket, not into the breast pocket this time, but an inner, deeper one. He pulled out a small leather-bound box, worn with age. He placed it carefully on the work table between them. "This is your daughter's," he said. "It contains her will, the life insurance policy, and the bank account book with the full amount. I had my financial officer verify it. It is all there. I am giving it back to you. I did not want Maya to carry the burden of its loss." Elara stared at the box, her vision blurring with sudden, unexpected tears. It wasn't just money. It was the final, tangible link to her deceased daughter, a legacy Maya thought she had foolishly gambled away. You kept it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It was never mine to take," Julian stated, his face utterly serious. "I am many things, Elara, but I am not a thief of a mother's legacy. I protect what is vulnerable. I always have." He reached out slowly, his large, powerful hand covering hers where it rested on the cool wood of the table. The contrast was stark. His strength, her fragility. It wasn't a demanding touch, but a grounding one. A current passed through her, shocking her with its warmth and unexpected comfort. "I need to tell you something else," Julian continued, his voice dropping further, his gaze holding hers captive. I came to this neighborhood for a reason. Vincente was just a symptom. The real target was his boss, a man named Corrado, a viper. I had an arrangement to have him eliminated, to clean up the neighborhood, and to take over his operations. Maya's complication changed everything. How? Elara asked, her throat tight. Corrado is obsessed with appearances, Julian explained, a look of grim contempt on his face. He is an old-world type. He keeps meticulous records of his assets. When Vincente threatened Maya, he did it by trying to get her to access her college's confidential records, records that would implicate Corrado's legitimate-looking charities in his money laundering. Corrado has a list of favors he owes in a safe, names of judges, politicians, police chiefs. If those names get out, his world burns. Maya inadvertently stumbled onto the access codes to those records, not the records themselves. Julian squeezed her hand gently, a small, reassuring pressure. I have been using Maya's disappearance as a way to create an advantage. Corrado thinks she has the list and that she's running. He's tearing the city apart to find her. While he is focused on her, I am focused on him. Tonight, that ends. I am moving against him. But I need you to understand. When this is over, everything changes. The gravity of his words settled into the quiet room. Elara realized she wasn't just talking to the man who mended suits anymore. She was talking to the architect of a violent, irreversible change. What do you need me to do? She asked, her voice steady now, devoid of fear. A flicker of respect passed through Julian's eyes. Nothing. Just be here, be safe, and wait for me to bring Maya back to you. He released her hand and picked up his empty coffee cup. I must go. The game is played now. He paused at the back door, his massive frame filling the threshold. Elara, he said, turning back one last time. You asked why I carry her photograph. It's more than a reminder. It's a promise. When I look at that image of her joy, it is the one clean thing in my world that I can protect. The one thing I am doing that is unequivocally right, and I will not let anything dirty it. And then he was gone, melting into the alley's shadows. Elara sat alone, staring at the leather box that held her daughter's legacy. She was no longer a timid seamstress. She was an anchor, a silent keeper of a Mafia boss's moral compass, waiting for the storm he had unleashed to subside. The hours that followed were a cold, long vigil. Elara couldn't sit still. She paced the shop, listening to the normal sounds of the city. A distant siren, a car horn, the drip of the faucet, trying to superimpose the violence she knew was taking place over the ordinary hum of the night. She watched the door, expecting, dreading, the arrival of his guards, or worse, the arrival of a consequence. The fear of what Julian was doing, what he was, warred with the knowledge of what he had done for Maya. He had placed her safety above his own intricate web of power, using his dark authority as a shield, not a weapon against her. Finally, just before the first weak gray of dawn began to paint the sky, a car pulled up to the curb. It wasn't the sleek black sedan. It was an unmarked, slightly beat-up SUV. The driver stayed in his seat, but the passenger door opened. Julian stepped out. He was no longer immaculate. His suit jacket was gone. His white shirt was torn and smeared with dirt, and something dark she immediately recognized as dried blood. There was a long, shallow cut across his cheekbone, and his usually perfectly combed hair was disheveled. He looked tired, bruised, and savagely effective. He looked like a man who had walked through a battle and won. He opened the back passenger door. Maya stepped out, pale, shaken, but physically unharmed. "Grandma!" Maya cried out, her voice shaky with relief. She ran toward the shop door, threw it open, and rushed into Elara's arms. "You're home, darling. You're home," Elara repeated, holding her tight, savoring the familiar weight of her granddaughter. Julian followed, walking into the shop, his presence now a wounded but triumphant force. He closed the door quietly, leaning back against it, his eyes meeting Elara's over Maya's head. He didn't speak. The victory was a silent testament to his promise. What happened? Maya asked, pulling away from Elara to look at Julian, her face etched with worry for him. Your face! And your shirt! We heard sirens on the highway. Jay, were you hurt? Julian smiled faintly, the movement pulling the skin on his cut cheek. A necessary cost, Maya. Nothing more. It's over. Corrado is finished. Vincente is no longer a problem. You are safe. You are free. Free? Maya whispered, looking from her grandmother to Julian, a tentative hope blooming in her eyes. To go back to my life. To live, Julian corrected, pushing off the door. He walked to the counter, pulling out a set of keys and a legal document. I have arranged a few things. First, the apartment you were staying in. It's yours now. A gift from a grateful man. It's clean, legitimate, and in a perfect location for the university. He placed the keys on the counter. Second, the documents you worried about. The ones that could get you into trouble. They are destroyed. I ensured that the problem is completely erased. He turned to Elara, his dark eyes intense. Elara, you are going to sell this shop. The rent is too high, the neighborhood is changing, and you need a change of scenery. I have put a considerable sum into the bank account you opened for Maya's tuition, a replacement, and a thank you. You are moving into that apartment with her. You will start over, together. You are both out of the woods, forever. The threat is removed. He was giving them a new life, a clean slate, using his power to meticulously build a sanctuary out of the wreckage of their fear. It was more than protection, it was provision. It was a complete, silent takeover of their welfare. Maya threw her arms around Julian's waist, burying her face in his torn, blood-stained shirt. Thank you, Jay. Thank you. I don't know how to ever repay you. Julian accepted her hug with a rare, open tenderness. You don't need to repay me, Maya. Just live well. That is enough. He looked over Maya's head again at Elara, and the tenderness in his eyes hardened back into the complex gaze of the power broker. The soft moment was over. I need to leave now, he said, pulling away from Maya gently. I have a city to reorganize, and I have to get this shirt off before I bleed through the perfect upholstery of my car. He paused at the door, but this time he didn't just walk out. He turned his attention entirely to Elara. I have fulfilled my promise, Julian stated, his eyes locking onto hers. She is safe, she is free, and now that she is out of danger, there is one last piece of business. He reached into his breast pocket and slowly, deliberately, pulled out the photograph of Maya, the small, smiling image she had seen weeks ago. He held it out to Elara. This is no longer a necessity, he said. The job is done. The promise is delivered. I don't need a reminder of what I must protect anymore. I can see her now. He placed the photograph into Elara's waiting hand, a final transfer of trust. Their fingers brushed, a fleeting electric touch that felt like the beginning of something new and terrifying. However, Julian continued, his voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur meant only for her, I have grown accustomed to your coffee, and your silence, and your quiet competence, and now that I have a clean suit and a clean city, I find myself needing a good seamstress for a very long time, and perhaps a different kind of anchor. Elara's heart did a strange, confusing dance of fear and thrilling acknowledgement. He was not asking her to be his lover, not yet. He was asking her to be a fixed point in his chaotic world. He was inviting her into the eye of the storm. Mr. Romano, she began, the old formality slipping back. Julian, he corrected gently. My name is Julian. I think we are past formalities, Elara. She looked at her granddaughter, who was already lost in a whirlwind of excitement about her new apartment and her restored life. Then she looked back at Julian, standing wounded but powerful in the pale dawn light, the weight of his protection a tangible thing between them. She placed the photograph next to the leather box on the counter. It was a legacy of love, secured by a debt of power. "The coffee is always brewing, Julian," Elara said, the acceptance in her voice a solemn vow. "But I will be moving out of this shop by the end of the week. You'll have to find me at my new address." Julian's lip quirked into a genuine, tired, satisfied smile. "I always find what I am looking for, Elara. Always." He gave her a final nod, a silent acknowledgement of their new, unspoken pact, and walked out the door and into the rising sun. Elara stood there, her granddaughter safe in her arms, a leather box full of money, a new apartment waiting, and the lingering scent of danger and expensive wool as the only evidence of the Mafia boss who had saved her family and claimed her as his own. The protective circle had closed, and she was now firmly inside it,